A brutal opening 20 minutes cost the Blackhawks their season opener in Utah. I'll go over what went wrong as well as changes to make in Game 2.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can go and find me on X at Jack Bushman2. Be sure to go and follow my Strictly Blackhawks account, though, at Talkin' Hockey. That way you can get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And got to remind you all as well that today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Be sure to go and download the Game Time app right now. And when you do, create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $20 off to the sporting events, concerts, or theater events near you. All right, good morning, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Certainly not the start to the regular season that we were hoping for, Blackhawks fans. A 5-2 defeat last night in Utah in the first game in the history of the Utah Hockey Club. Really plagued by a poor opening 20 minutes. That was kind of what did the Blackhawks in, if you will. And to kick things off on today's episode, as I will be doing following every Blackhawks game throughout the regular season, I'll be getting into my full recap and takeaways and talking about what went wrong when the Blackhawks lose games this year. I'll be having a segment that kick things off called What Went Wrong, and when they win games, I'll be talking about what went right. So again, just a reminder to please subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube so you don't miss out on any of my game recaps or my game previews, again, with the next one coming out Friday morning before the Blackhawks take on the Winnipeg Jets in their second game of the regular season. The first thing that I wanted to get into, though, from last night's disappointing 5-2 loss to the Utah Hockey Club were my three keys to victory, because the Blackhawks certainly didn't achieve any of these three keys. And to me, since they didn't, it's not that surprising that they wound up on the losing outcome. My first key to victory that I talked about on the show yesterday, Blackhawks fans, was for the Hawks to try and take the home crowd out of it early. What did they do? They went and had a dreadful first period, mustered up a whopping one shot on goal, felt like they were chasing the puck for the entirety of the period, and then, of course, gave up the opening 2 goals of the game. The Delta Center was absolutely roaring for the entirety of the game last night. The fans were into it early, and that was something I really felt like could have helped the Blackhawks throughout the way in this game. If they got off to a little bit of a better start, they kind of took some of the atmosphere and took some of the ruckus out of the crowd. They did the exact opposite with the way that they played in the opening 20 minutes. My second key to victory was to play with speed in transition, and I did think we saw a good amount of that from the Blackhawks in the third period. I thought they finally showed some good desperation in those final 20 minutes, but didn't see enough of it in the opening 30 to 40 minutes, in my opinion. And I thought it was funny. The first goal of the game that the Blackhawks scored, it was Connor Bedard using his speed in transition with a nice zone entry, finds Teuvo Teravainen. We need to see more of that out of the Blackhawks, because I really believe that's how they're going to score a lot of their goals, particularly from their top 6 forward group. It's counterattacks, and I feel like that's where Connor Bedard and co can be very dangerous. And they just didn't do enough of that throughout the entirety of last night's game. So my second key to victory didn't go very well for the Blackhawks. Neither did the first, and neither did the third. My third key to victory was for the Blackhawks top 6 to outscore Utah's. And Dylan Guenther scored 2 goals last night, albeit one was from an empty netter, but still, the top 6 for Utah was absolutely buzzing early on in this game. Clayton Keller found the back of the net. I would say Utah's top 6 outperform the Blackhawks, and that's why not that surprising to see the Blackhawks come out on the losing end. If Connor Bedard and the second line for the Hawks get outscored by the other team, I really think that's probably going to be a recipe for disaster for the Blackhawks for a majority of the year. They need Connor Bedard and company doing more inside the top 6. As far as what else went wrong for the Blackhawks, aside from not achieving any of my 3 keys to victory. The first period is really what absolutely screwed them. As I referenced, they just couldn't get control of the puck. They looked absolutely shell-shocked out there. They had no answers on the fly, and Utah was just skating circles around them. The Hawks looked slow. They looked uncompetitive, and man, I was getting a lot of texts from people saying, oh boy, Bush, is it going to be another very long year? And how it looked in the first period, yeah, I was a little bit scared. Just really a lack of chemistry, a lack of speed, I thought was very, very evident in that first period. And it was a little disappointing not only to have that lack of energy out of the gate, but they weren't able to kind of put anything together on the fly to stop the bleeding there in those opening 20 minutes until they hit the first intermission. So the Blackhawks didn't do themselves any favors with the performance that they had in the first period, and that's really the determining factor in this final outcome. Also, the power play was not very good, which isn't surprising considering what we saw from the Blackhawks man advantage in the preseason. I didn't think they moved the puck around very well. They had some real opportunities late in the second period to kind of chip into their deficit a little bit more. Not only did they come away without the finished product, but I also thought they did a poor job of kind of sustaining some momentum, and then they also really didn't get anything settled with those power play opportunities. So definitely something that cost the Blackhawks last night, going 0 for 3 on the man advantage. Also, just some kind of typical Blackhawks things that we've seen over the last couple of years, defensive breakdowns and poor decision-making really cost them in this one in the first period. Philip Kurashev, Taylor Hall, I posted a clip on my Talkin' Hockey Twitter account. Again, a good reason for you all to be following that out there. Of Taylor Hall and Philip Kurashev playing some less than ideal defense on Utah's opening goal of the game, and then on their second, Craig Smith with just an absolute no-no of a giveaway. If you're going to make that backhanded feed through the center of the ice as you're coming out of your defensive zone, you got to be 100% sure that it's going to get through. It didn't. That led to a quick odd man attack the other way for the hockey club, and then captain Clayton Keller winds up putting it into the back of the net. So definitely need to clean things up a little bit on the back end and in terms of just some decision making for the Blackhawks as well. Also, just some bad puck luck cost the Blackhawks in this one. It kind of worked in their favor in the first period. I think Utah hit 3 posts in the opening 20 minutes. So the Blackhawks were pretty fortunate to come out of that period down only 2-0. However, they were a little unfortunate to not be able to even up the score in this one late because of all the posts they hit. 4 posts hit from the Blackhawks in this game. Philip Kurashev had one yawning cage early on in the second period. Tyler Bertuzzi hit the post in the final minute with the Blackhawks trailing by a goal and the extra attacker out. So some unfortunate bounces, some unfortunate puck luck for the Blackhawks. Hopefully that kind of turns itself around and comes full circle over the weekend. Also, what went wrong? The top line really didn't get going for the Blackhawks until it was too late. Ilya Mikheyev, I thought, had a couple of decent shifts on the top line, but ultimately Luke Richardson did hit the blender button once again and actually bumped Nick Foligno up to the Blackhawks top line in the third period, and that trio, Foligno, Bedard, and Teravainen, generated the Blackhawks' second and final goal of the game. So something to keep an eye on, but not a good showing from the top line out of the gate. They needed more from them early on in this game. And then the last thing I had that went wrong was the new look defensive pairings didn't look very sharp either. The Martinez-Jones duo, I thought, struggled. Same with Brodie and Vlasic, and Richardson ended up hitting the blender button on the back end as well. Vlasic and Jones finished the game together. TJ Brodie and Alec Martinez played on the second pairing. Nolan Allen and Connor Murphy, I'll get to more on them here in just a second, but I thought they were probably the sturdiest defensive pairing for the Blackhawks, although they did play the least amount of ice time. But the big guns for the Blackhawks, the top 6, their top 4 defensive pairings, were not good enough in the early going of this game. And when the Blackhawks are playing catch-up, when they're behind the 8 ball, that is not the method that they want to be going about their business with. This is not a team that's meant to be playing from behind. So got to come out with a better start for sure from all areas when they play the Winnipeg Jets in their next contest on Friday night. But there are all my negative takeaways and what went wrong for the Blackhawks in their season opener against the Utah Hockey Club. going to take a quick break here, Blackhawks fans, but when I return, I'll get into some positive takeaways, plus why Lukas Reichel and Andreas Athanasiou need to be in the lineup on Friday in Winnipeg. But first, real quick, I got to talk to you all about Game Time. Hockey season has finally arrived, and I cannot wait to get back to the United Center here in Chelsea Dagger, grabbing a cold beverage and enjoying the atmosphere at the Madhouse. And I'm sure many of you Blackhawks fans listening and watching this right now feel the exact same way that I do, and that's why I'm here to talk to you all about Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events, not just hockey games, even easier. And I've personally used Game Time for probably over 10 years now to this point, when I was back in high school going to see the Blackhawks at the United Center, and I still use it to this very day. I went to a Cubs game a couple of weeks ago, sat in the bleachers in one of their final games of the year. How did I get my ticket? Oh yeah, I purchased it with Game Time. Whenever I need to purchase a ticket, whether it's to a sporting event, concert, or theater event, I always check Game Time first because it's the fastest, cheapest, and easiest way for you to purchase your tickets. Plus, I love how they provide views from all the seats in the venue so you know exactly what to expect before you arrive and before you make your purchase. Plus, they have last-minute deals, flash deals, and zone deals that make it so easy to both find and buy tickets now that hockey season has taken over. So I highly recommend you all go and download the Game Time app, and when you do, create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $20 off with your first purchase. Yes, you heard me right. You can get $20 off to come and see Connor Bedard down at the United Center this year. All you got to do, download Game Time, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Game Time. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Real quick, just want to say thank you to everyone out there who made Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen, here to start off your day. Now for your second listen, please be sure to go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where the action never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. And you can easily find the link to Locked On NHL down in the description of this video, or simply search on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Segment 2. There were still some positives to take away from last night's 5-2 loss to Utah, and definitely wanted to be sure to get into those on today's show. First and foremost, the final 40 minutes for the Blackhawks were rather solid. They outshot Winnipeg by a handed margin, 25-18 over the final 40 minutes. They outscored Winnipeg until, they added those 2 late insurance goals, right? And altogether, they just came with a much better effort. It felt like they actually had some chemistry. They were cycling the puck in the offensive zone. They were generating some prime scoring chances. I do need to tip my cap as well to Connor Ingram, man, because he played really stellar to keep his team in front late in this game. The Blackhawks had multiple opportunities in the third period to go and even up the score. They came with a much better effort, though. Those are the types of efforts that we can live with out of the Blackhawks. Now they just need to go and put it all together for a 60-minute game, because the opening 20 minutes was absolutely unacceptable, especially considering this is what you've been ramping up all preseason and training camp for. So as a team that scrimmaged right out of the gate in day one of training camp, and to go and have that lackluster of an opening 20 minutes was certainly concerning, but there still were a lot of positives along the way, particularly in those final 40 minutes. First and foremost, though, we got to talk about our boy Connor Bedard, baby. Because I thought he picked up right where he left off, looked rather comfortable. Yeah, he made a couple of turnovers, not going to make sure to leave those out so people don't crucify me in the comment section. There were a couple of bad plays, one in particular where I believe it was on the power play. He was trying to spin at the left circle and kind of blew a tire, turned the puck over there. But all in all, he was one of, if not the best player for the Blackhawks last night. Picked up assist on both of the Blackhawks goals. Beautiful primary assist on Teuvo Teravainen's goal to open the scoring for the Blackhawks. Nice zone entry to dodge a check from Mikhail Sergachev and then keep his head up, recognize what the defense was doing, and find Teuvo Teravainen wide open all by himself in the slot for a nifty little backhanded finish. A lot of good recognition from Connor Bedard. and he took on a lion's share role as to be expected, led all Blackhawks forwards with 21 minutes and 14 seconds of time on ice. Also led the team with 5 shots on goal, won 8 of 15 faceoffs, which I think is certainly notable. Taylor Hall, Teuvo Teravainen still had to take draws for him every now and again on the man advantage and what you will, but for the most part, liked what I saw out of Connor Bedard, and to go above 50% at the dot in his first game of the year. Really, really impressive. Tried the Michigan last night as well, and quite honestly, it had a chance to go in, and boy, would that have sent the crowd into an absolute frenzy. I don't care if they were in Utah. That would have been one of those, oh my goodness, what did we just witness type of situations in the first game ever in the history of Utah hockey. But what was clear to me is Connor Bedard, I mean, no surprise here. He's not lacking any confidence. Again, just looks like he always has full belief in himself. Like to see him be a little bit more assertive on the man advantage. I think he just has to be the predominant puck carrier, and he's got to be the one to do a lot of the creating for the Blackhawks there. But for the most part, I give Connor Bedard a smashing thumbs up for his performance last night. 2 points in the opening game of the year for the Blackhawks. Next positive takeaway I wanted to get into, Taylor Hall and Philipp Kurashev. I thought they both looked really solid together on the second line. And they were kind of the ones who really set the tone for the Blackhawks early in the second period to kind of turn things around after that disastrous start. Taylor Hall, I thought, played with some good speed, which is one of my biggest things I'm asking out of him this year, is to provide some speed and skill inside that top 6. It's so necessary for the Blackhawks, and he had a couple of really good zone entries, a dazzling one on the play where Philipp Kurashev had a yawning cage and wound up hitting the post. But as the game went on, I thought those guys kind of started to ramp things up. So a solid performance out of both Taylor Hall and Philipp Kurashev. And for Kurashev, nice to see him have a strong game when it's not with Connor Bedard, right? Like, we were wondering whether he was kind of the benefactor of playing on the top line with Bedsy last year. Was Philipp Kurashev a Connor Bedard merchant? Didn't look to be the case last night, as he was one of the biggest play drivers for the Blackhawks outside of that top line. Next, I got to give a lot of credit to Alex Vlasic, not only for picking up a primary assist in his first game of the season. Looked like it was going to be his goal there for a moment, but also chipped in for 3 block shots in just over 19 minutes worth of action. As I mentioned, finished the game on the top pairing with Seth Jones, and quite honestly, just what we saw from the preseason and in the short period of time with those original pairings last night, I just think it's wise to go back to the Seth Jones-Alex Vlasic pairing. They look very comfortable with one another, and quite honestly, with Alec Martinez being 37 years old, he doesn't need to be playing a top pairing role. Yes, we can still utilize him in the top 4, but we got to be a little bit more strategic about it. Alec Martinez played 24 minutes last night. At his age, you just can't do that night in and night out. So Alex Vlasic only had 19 minutes. I would expect that number to go up these next couple of games. He looked really sharp. I thought he made some nice plays turning defense into offense. Love to see him get the puck on net from the point on that goal that was credited to Nick Foligno, the captain, with the redirect. But that was something I really wanted to see Vlasic improve upon this year, getting more shots on net and having a little bit stronger of a shot from the blue line. Good start to the year for Alex Vlasic, I thought, last night. Nolan Allen as well, in his NHL debut, was rather solid. He actually led all Blackhawks defensemen in expected goals for at 5-on-5. He did have the lowest amount of ice time out of the 6 defensemen who dressed, but I thought he played a good, straightforward, and simple style of game, and that's kind of the game that he has to play in order to have success at this level. I don't expect him to ever be a prolific puck mover or a gifted skater, an offensive-minded defenseman. No, he's meant to be really sturdy and strong in the dirty areas in front of his own net, and just make those simple plays to get the puck out of harm's way. And I thought he did that really well last night. And that defensive pairing with Connor Murphy analytically was the best for the Blackhawks. So quick little hat tip for Nolan Allen for a successful NHL debut. I would say expect him to be in the lineup once again on a Friday in Winnipeg. Then I also got to give some love to Ryan Donato in the 4th line. Even though analytically they were like at the bottom of the Blackhawks game score chart, I thought they were pretty effective. And I couldn't tell you the last time I remember the Blackhawks 4th line having as many shifts and cycles in the offensive zone as we saw last night. out of Maroon, Donato, and Craig Smith. Pat Maroon, man, Blackhawks fans are going to love this guy. The way that he can control the puck and use his body, he's so strong and so big. He knows how to kind of lean on his edges in order to keep defenders away from the puck. Really good work from Pat in the offensive zone last night. Ryan Donato, I thought the one who was really creating the most and just picked up right where he left off from a very strong preseason. Good stuff out of Ryan Donato. Love to see that fourth line kind of generate some momentum and put some wind in the sails for the Blackhawks the rest of the way. And in the opening 20 minutes when no one looked good, I quite honestly thought the fourth line looked the sharpest for the Blackhawks there. So there are still some positive takeaways, even though the Blackhawks came out on the wrong end of the final outcome. The next thing I want to get to here, though, before we jump into the final segment of today's episode, is why, in my opinion, after what we saw last night, why Andreas Athanasiou and Lukas Reichel have to be back in the lineup on Friday. First and foremost, I just talked very nicely about the fourth line of Pat Maroon, Ryan Donato, and Craig Smith. I thought they played rather nicely. However, it is completely unacceptable for an NHL team who's trying to get better, who's trying to take that next step, trying to take a leap from what they were last year. It is unacceptable for them to have a second power play unit out of the gate of the fourth line plus Philip Kurashev and Alec Martinez on the back end. I mean, that might be the worst power play unit of any team in the NHL. And I know part of, I think, putting them out there was the success they were having as a trio at 5-on-5, but still, that is so disgusting, and we should be past those days. We have a talented enough roster to not be icing fourth liners as our second power play unit. Lukas Reichel, Andreas Athanasiou, I know they didn't have sharp preseasons, but you need to put together a second power play unit. The Blackhawks were 0 for 3 on the man advantage last night. One of the reasons why they weren't able to win this game, come all the way back from that 3-0 deficit, was because they were 0 for 3 on the man advantage. The top power play unit couldn't get anything going, and when you have fourth liners on your second unit, I mean, it's a tough look. So that's one reason why I believe AA and Reichel need to be back in there on Friday. Also, the lack of speed that the Blackhawks had in their forward group was so prevalent, and that's what happens when you become one of the older teams in the NHL suddenly. A lot of veteran additions made by the Blackhawks. Yes, some of them have wheels, but some of them don't. The fourth line, as good as they are at controlling the puck, very slow. The third line, as good as they are defensively, very slow. You need guys like Lukas Reichel and Andreas Athanasiou, two of the fastest skaters in the forward group. The Blackhawks, with today's NHL the way that it is, with the pace, they need those two guys in the lineup. Also, I didn't think there was enough consistency from the Blackhawks top 6, top 9 group to keep them out for a second game. And also, the message has now been sent by Luke Richardson. And the message was clear when training camp started. If you want to be a part of this opening night lineup, you're going to have to earn it in the preseason. And Athanasiou and Reichel didn't earn it in the preseason. However, for all the reasons I just said, they need to be back in there on Friday, and they also kind of need to be allowed to see if the message was received, if you will. See what kind of performance they can put together with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. I'm sure not very happy about being scratched in the first game of the season, so hopefully that lights a little bit of a fire under their butts and they can come into this lineup on Friday night and make a positive impact for the Blackhawks with their speed and on the offensive side of things. But that takes care of everything that I wanted to talk about from last night's season opening loss to the Utah Hockey Club. One final break to take here, Blackhawks fans, but when I return, I'll dive into TJ Brodie and Alec Martinez's 2024-25 season previews. But first, I got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. To all my NFL fans out there, you can now start the season with a big return over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can go and check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you also happen to place your bets. And to all of my Blackhawks fans out there, FanDuel has now dropped the over-under lines for all 32 NHL teams for this upcoming season. You can also bet on Calder Trophy winners, Hart Trophy winners, Do we think our boy Connor Bedard is going to come away with the Rocket Richard this year as the leading goal scorer in the NHL? Probably a little far-fetched, but I'm sure there are some crazy Blackhawks fans out there who would like to put a couple of dollars down on that. And if you're one of them, make sure to go and check out FanDuel.com right now. And if you're not already signed up, go and create an account. And when you put $5 down, you'll be awarded with $200 worth of bonus bets guaranteed. Yes, you heard me right. $200 worth of bonus bets guaranteed if you're not already a member over at FanDuel. All you got to do, create an account and put $5 down, and FanDuel will bless your account with $200 worth of bonus bets. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Real quick before I dive into segment 3, Blackhawks fans, just a reminder, Mailbag Monday is right around the corner. I'm sure many of you viewers and listeners have Blackhawks-related questions that you want to ask. Please make sure to reach out with those in the comment section down below. If you're tuning in through an audio platform, you can DM me on any one of my social media channels or even email lockedonblackhawks@gmail.com. Mailbag Monday, one of my favorite, if not my favorite segment that I do. But I can't do it without you. It takes two to tango. So please make sure to reach out with your Blackhawks-related questions, and I'll answer them live on the show Monday morning. Segment 3, before I close things out on today's episode, though, it's time to get into my next couple of Blackhawks season previews. And up today is none other than the two notable defensive signings that they made this past offseason, and Alec Martinez and TJ Brodie. And just as a reminder, I've already gone over Connor Bedard, Taylor Hall, Teuvo Teravainen, Lukas Reichel, Philip Kurashev, Alex Vlasic, Seth Jones, right? I've gone through a slew of Blackhawks players' season previews already. If you missed any of those, and there's a certain player in particular you want to hear about, you can easily find those videos on the YouTube channel. Everything is time-coded in the description, so you can quickly jump to that segment. And please make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already while you're there. And even though the regular season, of course, has started, Blackhawks fans, a couple of off days here for the Blackhawks on Wednesday and Thursday before a back-to-back up north of the border on Friday and Saturday. So that gives me a couple of more days to finish up my Blackhawks season previews. I'm going to be having, as I mentioned, Brodie and Martinez here today. And then to close things out, I'm going to be going over a goalie season preview with Peter Mrazek and Laurent Brossoit. So make sure to keep your eyes out for those episodes dropping later on in the week. But for TJ Brodie, signed a 2-year deal with the Blackhawks this past offseason, which I thought was a little interesting. I figured if they were going to go after another defenseman, it would probably be on a 1-year deal, considering the slew of youngsters that are trying to jump onto the NHL scene full-time these next couple of years. And Brodie being a 34-year-old defenseman signing a 2-year deal as well at $3.7 million. $3.75 million was a little bit of an interesting choice. However, I did like to see that Kyle Davidson took shoring up his back end seriously this past offseason, because it's an area that has just been far too killer for the Blackhawks these last couple of years, right? They have not been a strong defensive team since probably they traded Nicholas Hjalmarsson. Like, it's been a long time since the Blackhawks were rock solid on the back end. So got to take the signing of Brodie with 2 years with a little bit of a grain of salt. We got to see what he kind of puts together this year. But what I will say, he's been a rather sturdy top 4 defenseman for well over a decade now. This is his first year with Chicago, but his 14th full season in the NHL. Spent the last 4 years playing for the Toronto Maple Leafs in a top 4 role. And he's averaged 20 minutes per game in 13 of his 14 NHL seasons, Blackhawks fans. The only season in which he didn't average 20 minutes per game was his rookie year with the Calgary Flames. Every other season has been 20 minutes or more. So we know he's comfortable handling a sizable role, even as he does get up into his 30s. Is known for more of being a defensive defenseman, though, as opposed to the offensive side of things. Last year, chipped in for 26 points on the Leafs in 78 games. Only found the back of the net once, but did add 25 assists. But he did chip in for 159 block shots, 41 hits as well. Offensive side of things probably isn't going to be a strength of his here in Chicago. Those days have kind of came and went. He hasn't put up 30 points in a season since 2018-19, but at the same point in time, that really wasn't what he was brought in to do. And same story with Alec Martinez, who's a little bit older than TJ Brodie, 37 years old now, is the three-time Stanley Cup champion, entering his 15th full season in the NHL, also his first with the Blackhawks. Spent the last 4.5 years with the Vegas Golden Knights, playing a sizable role there, helped them bring a Stanley Cup back to the city, and last year put up 17 points, 4 goals, and 13 assists in only 55 games worth of action, and that's kind of been a trouble for Alec Martinez the last couple of seasons. He's missed significant time in 2 of the last 3 years, but when he is healthy, he's as reliable and surefire as they come in the defensive zone. Really good penalty killer, one of the best shot blockers of his era, and that's what he was brought in here to do with the Blackhawks. As far as where the Blackhawks need help from these two the most, priority number one just needs to be to kind of settle things down on defense. As I alluded to, there hasn't been like stability or reliability on the back end for far too long, and that's what these two veterans were brought in to do, to kind of settle things down in a top 4 role. I don't know exactly how the pairings are going to look. They're still kind of mixed and matched at this point in time. However, it's pretty clear that both of these veterans are going to be playing a decent role in a going to be playing in meaningful situations for the Blackhawks. So to kind of just provide that calming presence and to also be good leaders on and off the ice for the next generation of Blackhawks defensemen. That's really what I'm asking out of Alec Martinez and TJ Brodie. It's not to chip in much on the offensive side of things. I know Martinez is having to play second power play minutes. I'm not really concerned with that. Just settling things down on the defensive side of things, trying to minimize the mistakes in the own zone that the Blackhawks make, because that's been a problem for them for far too long, and just really teach these youngsters what it means to be good pros. I think those are the biggest keys for both Alec Martinez and TJ Brodie for however long their tenures last year in Chicago. Also, being sharp on the penalty kill, that's been an issue for the Blackhawks for far too long. Both of them have been really good at that job for their respected teams in the past, so that's kind of the biggest expectation as well that I have for them here in Chicago, is to help this penalty kill take a step in the right direction, and also be vocal out there. Be vocal leaders, communicate well. Feels like there's been a lot of lapses in coverage these last couple of years. Let's be better communicators. Let's talk better on the ice, and let's figure out, our problems and try to dissect them head first. That's what veterans are brought in to do. As far as the numbers that I expect, again, it's kind of tough to put numbers on these two aging, defensive-minded defensemen. For Martinez on an 82-game pace, I guess my biggest key for Alec Martinez is just try to stay healthy, right? Like, if he's able to stay healthy here in Chicago, that would be so crucial to this top 4 with his veteran expertise. Don't expect much offensively. However, even though he has kind of missed some time the last couple of years, still has been able to score like 3 or 4 goals regularly for Vegas. So on an 82-game pace, I'm going to go with 5 goals for Alec Martinez, maybe even 6 if he's playing on the second power play unit. 13 assists, though. I don't have him creating very much for this team in terms of playmaking, and altogether that gives him 18 points. As far as time on ice goes, I would really like to see Alec Martinez around 19 to 20 minutes, though. I don't want him in that 22 to 24 minute ballpark with Seth Jones on the top pairing. He's just not made for that with all the mileage on his tires at 37 years of age. Would love to see Alec Martinez in kind of a specified defensive-minded second pairing role for the Blackhawks. For TJ Brodie, he's been a little bit more reliable in terms of being healthy, knock on wood when I say that. I have more confidence in him that he's going to be able to hang on for an 82-game schedule here on the back end. However, hasn't been able to provide the goal-scoring ability that Alec Martinez has these last couple of years. So I have Brodie potting 3 goals for the Blackhawks on an 82-game pace, along with 17 assists. Seems like he might be the better of the 2 puck movers at this stage of his career. But both of these guys, again, not real offensive threats for this Blackhawks team. That's not what they were brought in to do. I have Martinez at 18 points, TJ Brodie at 20. I do think Brodie is the one who's capable of, averaging 21 to 22 minutes per game, more so than Martinez. Blackhawks, Luke Richardson, they still got to figure out what the defensive pairings are going to be, but as far as a big four or big five go, these two are assuredly going to have their fingers all over it, assuming that they stay healthy for the Blackhawks. Again, knock on wood. That's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcasts, and to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. That way, you can get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me on X at JackBushman2. Be sure to check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until the next episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your days. Stay safe. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.